The morning sun cast long shadows across the Syrian desert when Navy SEAL Commander Jake Viper Morrison did something that shocked every operator on his team. He handed his custom Barrett 50 caliber sniper rifle, a weapon worth more than most people's cars, to a 23-year-old Swedish medic named Frida Lundgren. Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've got something extra special planned. What happened next would rewrite everything they thought they knew about combat roles and turn a woman they dismissed as just the doc into the most requested asset in special operations. Freda Lundgren had been awake since before dawn, not because of any official duty roster, but because she had developed a habit of reviewing casualty reports from other theaters, studying wound patterns and treatment protocols that might save lives in the field. At 23, she stood barely 5'4" with blonde hair and bright blue eyes that made hardened operators treat her like their little sister rather than a fellow professional. The forward operating base in eastern Syria hummed with its usual pre-mission activity as Frida made her way to the medical bay. Her teammates called her Doc with the kind of affectionate condescension reserved for someone they viewed as essential but harmless. She was the medic who patched them up, ensured their gear was sanitized, and worried about their health while they focused on staying alive. What none of them knew was that Frida had spent the previous evening, like every evening for the past 6 months, studying more than medical journals. Hidden beneath her regulation medical texts were ballistics manuals, tactical shooting guides, and marksmanship theory books that she'd quietly acquired during her off-duty hours. Her official role was to heal, but her secret obsession was understanding every aspect of combat operations. Commander Morrison's SEAL team had been assigned to her medical unit 3 months earlier, and from the first day, the dynamic was clear. She was support personnel, valued and respected, but ultimately separate from the operators who conducted the real missions. During tactical briefings, she sat in the back, taking notes on potential casualty scenarios while they planned approaches and engagement strategies. The irony wasn't lost on her. Back in Sweden, Frida had been a competitive precision shooter since age 15, winning national championships in multiple disciplines before joining the military. Her father, a former Swedish Special Forces operator, had trained her on everything from pistols to rifles, instilling in her not just marksmanship skills, but a deep understanding of combat tactics. Yet here, surrounded by some of the world's most elite warriors, she was seen as the gentle medic who was good with a first aid kit. During medical briefings, when she suggested positioning adjustments to reduce casualty exposure or recommended tactical modifications based on wound ballistics, her input was met with polite nods and promptly ignored. The SEALs appreciated her medical expertise, but combat strategy was their domain. She was there to fix them when they got hurt, not to prevent them from getting hurt in the first place. The base's shooting range became her sanctuary. During off-duty hours, late at night when the operators were sleeping or playing cards, Frida would slip away to practice with her sidearm. The range officer, Sergeant Martinez, had noticed her precision and gradually allowed her access to other weapons for familiarization training. What started as basic proficiency evolved into something approaching mastery, though she kept these skills carefully hidden from her teammates. Her medical bag told the story of someone who understood combat far better than anyone realized. While other medics carried standard supplies, Frida's gear included specialized equipment for treating ballistic wounds in specific combat scenarios. She'd studied the anatomy of sniper engagements, close quarters combat injuries, and blast trauma with the same intensity that snipers studied wind patterns and ballistic trajectories. The morning briefing was routine, another intel gathering mission in the desert, where her role would be to monitor radio communications and provide medical support from a secure position. As Commander Morrison outlined the tactical approach, Frida found herself mentally calculating sight lines, identifying potential sniper nests, and noting defensive positions that the team hadn't mentioned. She kept these observations to herself, knowing that unsolicited tactical input from the medic would be unwelcome. What she didn't know was that today's routine mission would become anything but routine, and the skills she'd been quietly developing would soon become the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The Special Operations community operated on a carefully maintained hierarchy built on proven combat experience and specialized training. Commander Morrison's team was no exception. 8 elite operators who had earned their positions through years of the most demanding military training in the world. They moved with the confidence of professionals who trusted each other's capabilities completely, a trust built on a shared understanding of roles and responsibilities. Frida's position in this hierarchy was clearly defined and strictly limited. She was attached medical personnel, essential but separate from the operators who conducted direct action missions. During team briefings, she occupied a chair along the wall rather than at the tactical planning table. Her input was welcomed when it came to casualty evacuation procedures or medical contingencies, but tactical planning was outside her purview. The team dynamics reinforced these boundaries in subtle but consistent ways. When they discussed weapon loadouts, Frida's opinion wasn't sought. When they planned approach routes, her knowledge of terrain wasn't considered relevant. The operators treated her with respect and genuine care, but it was the kind of protective attitude reserved for someone who needed to be kept safe, rather than someone who could contribute to keeping others safe. Staff Sergeant Tommy Bulldog Chun, the team's designated marksman, embodied this attitude perfectly. He'd taken Frida under his wing during her first week, explaining base procedures and ensuring she understood her role. "Doc, your job is to keep us healthy and patch us up when we're not," he told her with fatherly concern. "Leave the shooting to us knuckle-draggers. We're pretty good at it." The assumption wasn't malicious. It was based on years of experience in a world where specialization meant survival. Medics focused on medicine, snipers focused on precision shooting, explosives experts handled demolitions, and communications specialists managed tactical networks. Cross-training existed, but it was usually limited to basic proficiency rather than advanced competence. What frustrated Frida most wasn't the limitation itself, but the complete lack of curiosity about what she might be capable of beyond her assigned role. None of her teammates had ever asked about her background, training, or interests outside of medicine. They saw her medical credentials and made assumptions about her complete skill set based on that single data point. The base's command structure reinforced these limitations through official channels. Medical personnel were specifically restricted from participating in direct combat operations except in support roles. When Frida requested permission to attend advanced tactical training courses, her requests were politely declined with explanations about maintaining focus on her primary military occupational specialty. Even her living arrangements reflected her outsider status. While the SEAL team shared quarters in the operators section of the base, Frida was housed with other support personnel in a separate building. This physical separation created social barriers that made it even more difficult to build the kind of relationships that might lead to expanded opportunities. During recreational time, the team's conversations revolved around topics that excluded her by assumption rather than intention. They discussed weapons modifications, tactical techniques, and combat experiences, but when Frida was present, they unconsciously shifted to more general topics. It wasn't that they didn't want her to participate. They simply couldn't imagine that she'd have anything meaningful to contribute to discussions about combat operations. The shooting range provided the clearest example of these limitations. While operators regularly trained together, sharing techniques and competing to maintain their skills, Frida's range time was solitary. When team members encountered her there, they assumed she was fulfilling basic qualification requirements rather than pursuing advanced proficiency. Her precision was noted but not discussed, filed away as an interesting but irrelevant observation. Commander Morrison, despite his reputation for tactical innovation, maintained the same blind spots as his team. He valued Frida's medical expertise highly and had specifically requested her assignment to his unit based on her trauma treatment capabilities. But when it came to tactical planning, he never considered that someone with her medical knowledge might also possess other valuable skills. The irony was that the team's effectiveness could have been enhanced by broader utilization of all available capabilities, but the institutional framework made such cross-functional thinking nearly impossible. Everyone operated within their designated lanes, and those lanes were clearly marked and strictly maintained. This systematic limitation of her role meant that when crisis situations arose, Frida's potential contributions were never considered. The team had contingency plans for various scenarios, but none of those plans included leveraging capabilities that existed outside their established understanding of each member's role. As the morning briefing concluded and the team prepared for another routine mission, None of them realized that their carefully maintained assumptions about roles and capabilities were about to be tested in ways that would force them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about their quiet Swedish medic. While her teammates slept or relaxed during off-duty hours, Frida pursued an intensive self-directed training program that would have impressed even the most dedicated operators. Her small quarters contained a carefully hidden collection of technical manuals, ballistics charts, and tactical guides that she'd acquired through careful networking with other military personnel across the base. Every evening after completing her medical duties, Frida would spread these materials across her desk and study with the same intensity she'd once applied to medical school. She memorized the effective ranges of every weapon system used by the SEAL team, understood the ballistic characteristics of different ammunition types, and could calculate wind drift and bullet drop for various engagement scenarios. Her medical knowledge gave her unique insights into shot placement that purely tactical training might miss. The base's communication center became an unexpected source of tactical education. During quiet periods, Frida volunteered to help monitor radio traffic, gradually developing an understanding of how different units coordinated fire support and tactical movement. She learned to recognize the verbal codes that indicated various tactical situations and began to understand the complex choreography of modern combat operations. Her relationship with Sergeant Martinez at the shooting range evolved into an informal mentorship that neither of them fully acknowledged. Martinez, a former Army Ranger who transitioned to range operations after a combat injury, recognized something in Frida's shooting style that reminded him of natural-born precision shooters he'd served with. He began leaving advanced marksmanship manuals in locations where she'd find them and gradually introduced her to weapon systems beyond her issued sidearm. The Barrett 50 caliber rifle became Frida's particular fascination. She studied its technical specifications, memorized its operation manual, and understood its tactical applications in ways that went far beyond academic interest. When Martinez occasionally allowed her to examine the weapon during maintenance periods, she absorbed every detail of its construction and capabilities. She never actually fired the Barrett, as that would have required permission she couldn't obtain, but she understood the weapon as thoroughly as if she'd been trained on it. Physical conditioning was another area where Frida pushed herself beyond requirements. While her medical duties required basic fitness standards, she maintained the kind of physical conditioning that would allow her to carry heavy equipment over difficult terrain. Her morning runs extended well beyond regulation requirements, and she incorporated strength training that focused on functional capabilities rather than appearance. The most sophisticated aspect of her preparation involved psychological conditioning. Using techniques she'd learned from sports psychology during her competitive shooting years, Frida practiced mental exercises designed to maintain performance under extreme stress. She visualized complex tactical scenarios, walked through decision-making processes under pressure, and developed the kind of mental resilience that separated competent soldiers from exceptional ones. Her medical knowledge became a force multiplier for her tactical understanding. She studied wound ballistics not just to treat injuries, but to understand how different weapons performed in various situations. Her knowledge of human anatomy gave her insights into shot placement that many marksmen never developed. She understood not just where to aim, but why certain shots were more effective than others in specific tactical contexts. Language skills provided another hidden advantage. Frida spoke fluent Arabic in addition to her native Swedish and military English, a capability that had been noted in her personnel file but never utilized operationally. She spent her free time monitoring local communications, developing an understanding of regional dialects and tactical terminology that could prove valuable in intelligence gathering. The most challenging aspect of her preparation was maintaining secrecy while pursuing such comprehensive self-improvement. Frida had to balance her obvious dedication to medical excellence with her hidden development of tactical capabilities. She became expert at deflecting questions about her evening activities, usually redirecting conversations toward medical topics that her teammates found less interesting. Her personal equipment told the story of someone preparing for possibilities that others couldn't imagine. Hidden among regulation medical supplies were items that served dual purposes: tactical first aid equipment that could function in combat situations, communication gear that could interface with military networks, and personal protective equipment that exceeded standard medical corps requirements. The psychological toll of this hidden preparation was significant. Frida constantly felt the tension between her public role and her private capabilities, knowing that she was developing skills that might never be recognized or utilized. She sometimes wondered if her efforts were pointless, preparing for opportunities that would never come. What kept her motivated was the knowledge that preparedness was its own reward. Even if she never had the chance to use these skills operationally, the discipline of continuous improvement made her better at everything she did. Her medical performance benefited from her tactical understanding, her physical conditioning enhanced her endurance during long missions, and her mental preparation helped her maintain composure during stressful situations. As another routine mission approached, Frida completed her preparations with the same meticulous attention to detail she applied to medical procedures. She had no way of knowing that today's mission would finally provide the opportunity to demonstrate capabilities that she'd been developing in secret for months. The pattern had become so familiar that Frida could predict it with depressing accuracy. Each time Commander Morrison's team received a complex mission requiring specialized skills, she would watch qualified operators being selected while her capabilities remained invisible to decision-makers. The accumulated weight of these dismissals had created a persistent ache that she carried like an old injury. 3 weeks earlier, when the team had been tasked with a reconnaissance mission requiring Arabic language skills, Frida had quietly mentioned her fluency to Staff Sergeant Chun. His response was well-intentioned but devastating. "That's great, Doc, but we need you focused on keeping us healthy. Let the intel guys handle the language stuff." The mission proceeded with a borrowed translator while Frida remained at base managing medical supplies. The sniper support mission from the previous month provided another painful example. When Sergeant Williams, the team's primary marksman, was sidelined with a shoulder injury, the unit requested a replacement from another SEAL team rather than considering alternatives within their existing personnel. Frida had observed the decision-making process with growing frustration, knowing that her marksmanship skills exceeded those of several operators who were considered for the temporary assignment. Her suggestions during tactical planning sessions were met with the kind of polite attention reserved for well-meaning but irrelevant input. When she recommended alternative casualty evacuation routes based on her terrain analysis, Commander Morrison would nod appreciatively and then proceed with the original plan. Her medical expertise was valued, but her tactical insights were consistently discounted as outside her area of competence. The most painful dismissal had occurred during a mission planning session where the team struggled with a complex shot angle problem. Frida knew the solution immediately. Her competitive shooting background had included similar scenarios. But when she attempted to contribute, Bulldog Chun had gently interrupted. "Doc, why don't you focus on setting up the casualty collection point? We'll figure out the shooting angles." Her personnel evaluations reflected this limited utilization. Commander Morrison consistently rated her medical performance as exceptional, but comments about her overall contribution remain narrowly focused on healthcare delivery. Specialist Lundgren continues to provide outstanding medical support to the team. Read her most recent evaluation. Her dedication to maintaining team health and fitness is exemplary. There was no mention of initiative, tactical thinking, or potential for expanded responsibilities. The social dynamics reinforce these professional limitations. During team gatherings, conversations about tactical challenges would quietly shift to other topics when Frida joined the group. It wasn't malicious. Her teammates genuinely cared about including her, but they couldn't imagine that she might have valuable insights about the technical aspects of their work. Training opportunities provided another source of frustration. When advanced courses became available, team members were selected based on their primary specialties and expected career progression. Frida's requests to attend tactical training were consistently declined, not because of any doubt about her capabilities, but because such training was deemed irrelevant to her role. "Let's get you into that advanced trauma surgery course instead," Morrison had responded to her latest request. The equipment assignment process reflected the same assumptions. While operators received the latest weapon systems and tactical gear, Frida's equipment requests were limited to medical supplies and basic protective equipment. Her suggestion that medical personnel might benefit from enhanced communications equipment was noted but never implemented. The underlying assumption was that medics needed to be protected rather than enabled. Even her demonstrated competence in peripheral areas was consistently undervalued. When she'd successfully troubleshot a communications equipment failure that had stumped the team's technical specialist, the incident was treated as an interesting anomaly rather than evidence of broader capabilities. Lucky guess had been the general consensus rather than a recognition of systematic technical knowledge. The pattern extended to mission assignments where her language skills could have provided significant advantages. Despite her Arabic fluency appearing in her personnel file, she was never considered for missions requiring local population interaction. The assumption was that such contact was inherently dangerous and therefore inappropriate for medical personnel, regardless of their linguistic capabilities or cultural knowledge. Her physical fitness, which exceeded that of several team members, was similarly dismissed when it came to mission selection. During a particularly challenging insertion that required significant physical conditioning, Frida had volunteered to participate, knowing that her endurance training made her better prepared than some of the selected personnel. The response was swift and definitive. "Doc, we need you fresh and ready to patch us up when we get back." The most frustrating aspect of these repeated dismissals was their self-reinforcing nature. Because she was never given opportunities to demonstrate expanded capabilities, there was no evidence to challenge the assumptions that prevented such opportunities. Her potential remained theoretical while her limitations were treated as definitively established. Each dismissal chipped away at her confidence, while simultaneously strengthening her resolve. She began to understand that changing perceptions would require more than gradual demonstration of competence. It would require a dramatic moment that forced her teammates to confront their assumptions. The question was whether such a moment would ever arise, or whether she would spend her entire deployment watching opportunities pass while her capabilities remained invisible. As the team prepared for another mission where her skills would be underutilized, Frida struggled with the familiar tension between acceptance and rebellion, between fitting into her assigned role and pursuing the opportunities she believed she deserved. The first sign that something had shifted came during a routine equipment inventory when Staff Sergeant Chun made an offhand comment that sent ice through Frida's veins. "You know, for a medic, Doc spends an awful lot of time at the shooting range." His tone was casual, almost joking, but the implication hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Frida's heart hammered as she continued counting medical supplies, pretending not to hear the murmured response from another team member. "Yeah, and she's always asking questions about weapon specs. Seems pretty interested in stuff that's not really her department." The conversation moved on, but the damage was done. Her dedication to improving herself was being reframed as something questionable, possibly inappropriate. Over the following days, she began noticing changes in how her teammates interacted with her. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. Conversations would pause when she entered a room, resume with slightly different topics, and carry an undercurrent of caution that hadn't existed before. Her technical questions, once viewed as professional curiosity, were now met with evaluating stares and measured responses. The transformation was most evident in her relationship with Sergeant Martinez at the shooting range. Their informal mentorship, built over months of shared respect for marksmanship, suddenly became awkward and constrained. "Maybe you should focus on the medical training for a while," Martinez suggested during what would be their final session together. "Some people are starting to wonder why you're spending so much time with weapons that aren't part of your job." The whispers followed a predictable pattern, growing more specific and more damaging with each iteration. Her evening study sessions, once ignored, were now characterized as obsessive behavior that suggested misplaced priorities. Her physical conditioning routine was reinterpreted as evidence that she was trying to compete with operators rather than support them. Even her linguistic abilities were viewed through this new lens of suspicion. Bulldog Chun, who had always been protective of her, pulled her aside after a team briefing with the kind of fatherly concern that made the conversation even more painful. "Doc, some of the guys are saying you're getting a little too interested in the tactical side of things. I know you're just trying to be thorough, but maybe it's time to dial it back a bit. Focus on what you're actually here for." The institutional response was swift and systematic. Her range privileges were quietly restricted without official explanation. Requests for technical manuals that had previously been routinely approved were now denied or delayed indefinitely. Her access to tactical communications during training exercises was limited to medical frequencies only. The base was subtly but effectively limiting her exposure to information that might fuel her inappropriate interests. Commander Morrison's attitude toward her began to shift in ways that were professionally devastating. During briefings, her medical input was still welcome, but her questions about tactical procedures were met with polite deflection. "That's not really something you need to worry about, Doc," became a standard response to inquiries that had previously generated detailed discussions. The most damaging aspect of the Whisper campaign was how it recontextualized her entire service record. Her excellent performance evaluations were now viewed through the lens of someone who might be overly ambitious, possibly unhappy with her assigned role. Her requests for additional training were retroactively interpreted as evidence of dissatisfaction rather than dedication to improvement. Her teammates began to treat her with the kind of careful courtesy reserved for someone whose loyalty or judgment might be questionable. Conversations about sensitive topics ceased when she was present, and technical discussions were abbreviated or postponed. She found herself increasingly isolated from the informal information networks that had helped her understand the unit's operations. The psychological impact was devastating. Frida had spent months building relationships and earning respect through competence and dedication, only to watch that foundation crumble under suspicions that she couldn't directly address. Any attempt to defend her interests or explain her motivations would only reinforce the narrative that she was overstepping appropriate boundaries. Her living situation became another source of tension. The friendly interactions with other base personnel that had characterized her off-duty time were replaced by awkward encounters and abbreviated conversations. Word had spread beyond her immediate team that the Swedish medic was getting ideas above her station, and the social consequences were swift and isolating. Sleep became elusive as Frida replayed conversations, searching for ways she might have prevented this perception shift. Her dedication to excellence was being punished rather than rewarded, and the skills she'd worked so hard to develop were now viewed as evidence of poor judgment rather than professional development. The most painful realization was that her teammates' concerns weren't entirely unfounded. She had been pursuing capabilities beyond her assigned role, driven by a combination of personal interest and frustration with her limited utilization. But their interpretation of her motivations was devastating. Instead of seeing someone who wanted to contribute more effectively, they saw someone who couldn't accept her place in the team structure. As the Whisper campaign gained momentum, Frida faced a choice that would define the rest of her deployment: accept the limitations that others had placed on her and focus exclusively on her medical duties, or continue developing capabilities that might never be recognized or utilized. The stakes of that choice were about to become much higher than anyone could have imagined. The summons to Commander Morrison's office came on a Tuesday morning that had started like any other. Frida sat across from his desk, her service records spread between them like evidence in a court-martial, while Morrison's weathered face carried the kind of expression that suggested difficult decisions were about to be made. "Lundgren," Morrison began, his fingers drumming against the desk in a rhythm that betrayed his discomfort with the conversation, "I need to address some concerns that have been raised about your focus and priorities." The formal tone was a stark departure from their usual interactions, and Frida felt her stomach drop as she realized the Whisper campaign had reached official channels. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand what concerns you're referring to," Frida replied, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She knew exactly what this was about, but hoped that playing innocent might force Morrison to be more specific about the charges against her dedication. Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying her with eyes that seemed to be measuring her character against some internal standard. "Multiple team members have reported that you've been pursuing training and interests that fall well outside your assigned responsibilities. There are questions about whether you're fully committed to your role as medical support personnel." The words hit like physical blows, each one carefully chosen to undermine her professional standing without making specific accusations that she could directly refute. Frida realized that this conversation had been planned, that Morrison had consulted with others before calling her in, and that her fate might already be decided. "Sir, I've always maintained the highest standards in my medical duties," Frida said, her voice carrying an edge of controlled frustration. "My performance evaluations have been consistently excellent, and I've never neglected any assigned responsibilities. She was fighting for her career now, and both of them knew it. That's not the issue, Morrison replied, his tone growing sterner. The issue is scope and focus. You've been spending considerable time studying tactical procedures, weapon systems, and operational planning, areas that are outside your area of responsibility and expertise. This has created questions about your judgment and your commitment to your assigned role. Frida felt anger building alongside her fear, but forced herself to remain professional. Sir, I believe that understanding the broader operational context makes me more effective in my medical role. Knowledge of tactical procedures helps me anticipate casualty scenarios and prepare more effectively for medical support requirements. Morrison's expression suggested that he'd heard this argument before and found it unconvincing. Lundgren, I need medical personnel who are focused on medicine, not distracted by operations they're not qualified to participate in. Your job is to keep my team healthy and treat their injuries, not to study tactical procedures or weapon systems. The conversation was moving in a direction that Frida recognized as potentially career-ending. Morrison wasn't just questioning her judgment, he was questioning her fitness for continued service with the team. Sir, with respect, my additional studies have never interfered with my medical duties, Frida said, her voice now carrying a note of desperation that she couldn't entirely suppress. I conduct this training during my personal time, and it's motivated by a desire to contribute more effectively to team success. That's exactly the problem, Morrison replied, leaning forward to emphasize his point. You're not satisfied with the role you've been assigned. You're pursuing capabilities that suggest you want to do something other than what the military has trained you for and assigned you to do. This raises questions about your professional maturity and your understanding of military structure. The accusation stung because it contained enough truth to be difficult to refute. Frida was frustrated with her limited role, did want to contribute more broadly, and had been developing capabilities that went beyond her official duties. But Morrison's interpretation of her motivations missed the fundamental point. She wanted to serve more effectively, not abandon her medical responsibilities. Sir, I'm requesting that you consider the possibility that expanded capabilities might enhance rather than detract from my primary duties, Frida said, making one final attempt to reframe the conversation. Understanding tactical operations makes me a more effective medic, not a less focused one. Morrison stood up, signaling that the conversation was reaching its conclusion. Lundgren, I'm going to be very clear about expectations going forward. You will limit your training and study to medical subjects directly related to your assigned duties. You will not pursue tactical training, weapons familiarization, or operational planning studies. Your focus will be exclusively on your medical responsibilities. The words fell like a gavel, officially limiting her development and growth. Frida realized that she was being forced to choose between compliance and career suicide, between accepting limitations and risking everything she'd worked for. I need to know that you understand these expectations and that you're committed to meeting them, Morrison continued. Any continued behavior that suggests divided loyalties or inappropriate ambitions will result in your reassignment to a non-operational medical unit. Frida stood as well, her mind racing through implications and options. She could accept these limitations and spend the rest of her deployment as a constrained and underutilized medic, or she could continue developing her capabilities in secret, knowing that discovery would end her special operations career. I understand your expectations, sir, she said finally, her voice carrying none of the compliance that Morrison was hoping to hear. As she left his office, Frida realized that the confrontation had changed nothing except making the stakes of her choices crystal clear. The emergency klaxon shattered the afternoon calm, its piercing wail cutting through the base's routine activities like a blade through silk. Frida dropped her medical inventory clipboard and sprinted toward the operations center, her heart hammering against her ribs as fragmented radio chatter filled the air with urgent, overlapping voices. Overwatch down! An overwatch down! The call crackled through multiple radio frequencies simultaneously, creating a chaos of static and desperate communication attempts. Frida pushed through the gathering crowd of personnel until she could see the operations center's main tactical display, where a red indicator blinked ominously on the digital map of their area of operations. Commander Morrison stood at the center of the controlled chaos, his face grim as he coordinated response efforts while trying to piece together what had happened to his sniper team. The tactical display showed their last known position, a ridgeline observation post that provided overwatch for a convoy route used by friendly forces. Now that position was silent, and enemy forces were mobilizing in the area. Viper 6, this is base. Morrison's voice cut through the radio static with practiced authority. Report your status immediately. The response was barely audible through interference and distance, but the words sent ice through everyone's blood. Base Viper 6, Barrett compromised. Williams down under heavy fire. Cat maintaining position. Frida watched the satellite feed showing the sniper position, recognizing the terrain immediately from her months of studying the operational area. The observation post was located on a narrow ridge that provided excellent fields of fire but limited escape routes. If the enemy had flanked the position, the sniper team would be trapped with nowhere to retreat. "Sir," came the voice of Staff Sergeant Chone through the communication system. Williams took shrapnel to his shooting arm. He can't operate the Barrett. We need immediate extraction or sniper support, but we can't move from this position without exposing the convoy road to enemy fire. Morrison studied the tactical display with the intensity of a man calculating impossible odds. The nearest sniper support was too far away by helicopter, and the convoy they were protecting would be in the kill zone soon. Enemy forces were advancing on the observation post, and extraction would require the team to abandon their Overwatch mission at the exact moment when it was most critical. "Options," Morrison demanded, his voice carrying the weight of command decisions that could determine life or death for multiple units. The assembled staff began offering alternatives, each one carrying significant risks and uncertain outcomes. Call for artillery support, too close to friendly positions, request immediate extraction, abandons the convoy protection mission, wait for backup sniper support. Not enough time. Frida found herself studying the tactical situation with the same analytical intensity she applied to complex medical procedures. The problem wasn't just technical, it was about matching available resources to mission requirements under extreme time pressure. The Barrett 50 caliber rifle was still functional, positioned perfectly to provide convoy protection, but the team lacked a qualified operator who could use it effectively. As the debate continued around her, Frida's mind raced through calculations she'd never expected to make in a real operational context. Range to target within Barrett's effective engagement distance, wind conditions minimal based on current weather reports, tactical situation with stationary targets in predictable positions. Her months of studying ballistics and weapon systems suddenly felt less like an academic exercise and more like preparation for this exact moment. "Sir," she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the tactical discussion surrounding her. Morrison didn't hear her, focused as he was on coordinating multiple response efforts simultaneously. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. "Commander Morrison, sir." The operations center fell silent as Morrison turned toward her, his expression shifting from intense focus to irritation at the interruption. "Lundgren, this is not the time for medical questions. We'll coordinate casualty evacuation once we resolve the tactical situation." "Sir, I'm not asking about medical procedures," Frida replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "I'm volunteering to serve as sniper support for the observation post." The words hung in the air like cordite after a gunshot, creating a silence that seemed to stretch for hours rather than seconds. Every face in the operations center turned toward her, most displaying expressions of disbelief, others showing something approaching pity for her apparent misunderstanding of the situation. Morrison's face cycled through confusion, irritation, and what might have been concern for her mental state. "Lundgren, you're a medic," he said with the kind of patient tone reserved for explaining obvious facts to confused personnel. "You're not qualified for sniper operations, and you're certainly not trained on the Barrett system." His dismissal was automatic, based on months of assumptions about her capabilities and role limitations. But as Morrison turned back to the tactical display, looking for alternatives that didn't exist, Frida remained standing at attention, waiting for him to realize that conventional solutions wouldn't work in this unconventional situation. The convoy was minutes from the kill zone, Enemy forces were closing in on the observation post, and backup sniper support was still too far away. Mathematics didn't care about military hierarchy or role assignments. The only person who could reach the observation post in time to operate the Barrett was standing in the operations center, volunteering for a mission that everyone assumed she couldn't accomplish. Morrison's response was swift and decisive, delivered with the kind of authority that had ended countless tactical discussions throughout his career. Absolutely not, Lundgren. You're medical personnel, not a sniper. I need qualified operators handling weapon systems, not well-meaning support staff attempting missions they're not trained for. The dismissal carried the weight of military protocol and common sense, backed by years of experience that said medics treated wounded soldiers while snipers engaged enemy targets. The two roles existed in separate worlds, and crossing those boundaries was a recipe for disaster that could cost lives and compromise missions. Sir, with respect, I am qualified, Frida replied, her voice carrying a note of urgency that matched the tactical situation developing on the display screens around them. I've studied the Barrett system extensively. I understand the ballistics, and I know the engagement ranges for the current tactical situation. Staff Sergeant Chun stepped forward, his expression mixing protective concern with professional skepticism. Doc, studying weapon manuals isn't the same as operating under combat stress. Sniping isn't about knowing specifications. It's about making precision shots when people are shooting back at you. Morrison nodded approvingly at Chun's intervention, clearly relieved to have support for his decision. Chun's right, Lundgren. Combat marksmanship requires training and experience that you simply don't have. Your medical expertise is valuable, but it doesn't qualify you for tactical operations. The tactical display continued its relentless countdown toward disaster. Convoy nearing the kill zone, enemy advancing on the overwatch position, backup sniper support still too far away. The mathematics of the situation remained unchanged by military hierarchy or role assignments, but Morrison seemed determined to find a solution that didn't involve departing from established protocols. Sir, Frida pressed, knowing that each second of delay reduced their options further, the Barrett is already positioned and zeroed. The tactical situation is straightforward, stationary targets at known ranges. This isn't a complex sniper mission requiring advanced fieldcraft. It's precision shooting from a prepared position. It's combat, Lundgren, Morrison replied sharply, his patience clearly wearing thin. Combat changes everything. The stress, the pressure, the consequences of missing. Those aren't things you learn from manuals. Those are things you learn through training and experience that you don't have. Around the operations center, other personnel watched the debate with expressions ranging from sympathy to skepticism. None of them questioned Morrison's decision. It aligned with everything they understood about military roles and qualifications. The idea that a medic could effectively operate as a sniper struck them as either desperate thinking or dangerous delusion. The radio crackled with another transmission from the observation post, this one carrying increased urgency and background sounds that suggested the tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Base Viper 6, enemy forces advancing on our position. Williams is losing blood, and we can't effectively engage targets at range without sniper support. Morrison studied the tactical display with growing frustration, searching for alternatives that simply didn't exist within conventional parameters. Artillery support was ruled out by proximity to friendly forces, close air support was unavailable due to weather conditions, and ground reinforcements couldn't reach the position in time to prevent enemy advances. Sir, came another voice from the communication station. Convoy commander is requesting immediate confirmation of route security. They need to know if overwatch protection will be available when they enter the danger area. The weight of multiple life or death decisions pressed down on Morrison's shoulders as he realized that conventional solutions were insufficient for the current crisis. But years of military training and command experience argued against departing from established protocols, especially when the proposed alternative involves such a dramatic role deviation. Lundgren, I appreciate your willingness to volunteer, Morrison said finally, his tone carrying the finality of a command decision. But I cannot and will not authorize medical personnel to conduct combat operations. Your job is to prepare for casualty treatment, not to engage enemy forces. Frida felt the familiar sting of dismissal, but this time the stakes extended far beyond her personal frustration. Lives hung in the balance, not just the sniper team on the ridgeline, but the convoy personnel who depended on Overwatch protection and the friendly forces who would be exposed if the tactical situation collapsed. "Sir, what alternative do you propose?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of challenge that bordered on insubordination. "Backup sniper support won't arrive in time, extraction abandons the mission, and the current tactical situation is unsustainable." Morrison's face hardened at the implicit criticism of his decision-making, but before he could respond, another radio transmission cut through the tension. "Base Viper 6, enemy contact imminent. We're about to lose this position, and the convoy route will be compromised. Request immediate instructions." The operations center fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Soon, friendly forces would enter a kill zone without Overwatch protection because conventional military thinking couldn't adapt to unconventional circumstances. Morrison stared at the tactical display, wrestling with decisions that would define the outcome of multiple missions and possibly multiple lives. But even as the situation deteriorated, his training argued against the kind of desperate measures that departure from protocol represented. Medics were medics, snipers were snipers, and crossing those boundaries was a risk he couldn't authorize, regardless of the consequences. As Frida watched the digital countdown continue its relentless march toward disaster, she realized that her months of preparation and skill development meant nothing if she wasn't willing to act when action was necessary. The choice was no longer about career advancement or professional recognition. It was about whether she could live with the consequences of inaction when she possessed the capabilities to make a difference. Frida left the operations center with Morrison's dismissal ringing in her ears, but her mind was already shifting from debate to action. The convoy was minutes from the danger zone, enemy forces were minutes from overrunning the observation post, and official backup was still too far away. Her quarters were a short sprint from the operations center, and she moved with a kind of focused urgency that came from months of mental preparation for exactly this type of scenario. Hidden beneath regulation medical supplies was the specialized equipment she'd been quietly accumulating, gear that no one knew existed because no one had ever asked what a dedicated medic might need for extended field operations. The tactical radio she'd acquired through careful trading with communications personnel would allow her to monitor the developing situation and coordinate with the observation post. Her personal protective equipment exceeded standard medical corps requirements, designed for someone who might need to operate in contested areas rather than secure aid stations. Most importantly, her range estimation tools and ballistic calculation aids would allow her to make the kind of precision adjustments that separated competent shooting from combat effectiveness. As she gathered her equipment, Frida's mind ran through the tactical situation with the clarity that came from months of studying similar scenarios. The observation post was located on coordinates she'd memorized, at a range she'd calculated repeatedly during her private training sessions. Wind conditions were minimal, visibility was excellent, and the enemy forces would be moving through terrain that offered limited concealment. Her medical knowledge provided advantages that purely tactical training might miss. She understood the anatomy of incapacitation in ways that would allow her to make shot placement decisions based on stopping power, rather than just target acquisition. Her understanding of trauma physiology would help her maintain effectiveness under the kind of stress that caused some shooters to lose precision when it mattered most. The most challenging aspect of her preparation wasn't technical, it was psychological. Frida had to shift from a mindset focused on healing to one focused on neutralizing threats, a transformation that went against everything her medical training emphasized. But her months of mental conditioning had prepared her for this transition, and she found herself able to compartmentalize the conflicting demands of her different skill sets. Her route to the observation post was already planned, memorized during her unofficial terrain studies. A maintenance road led to within 300 meters of the ridgeline, from where she could approach on foot through terrain that offered concealment from enemy observation. The total movement time would be tight, leaving her a narrow window to reach the position before the tactical situation became untenable. The letter she'd written to her family months earlier remained sealed in her personal effects, but she quickly composed a brief note explaining her actions in case the mission went badly. Unlike her unauthorized preparations, this decision carried consequences that extended beyond her career to potentially her survival. But the alternative, watching people die when she possessed the skills to help them, was unacceptable. Her communications with the observation post would have to be carefully managed to avoid revealing her unauthorized approach until she was in position to contribute effectively. The sniper team was expecting either official reinforcement or extraction orders, not the arrival of their medic carrying precision shooting equipment. Equipment check completed quickly, each item verified and secured for rapid movement. Radio frequencies programmed and tested, route memorized and alternatives identified, ballistic data reviewed and confirmed, mental conditioning exercises completed to manage stress and maintain performance under pressure. The base's security checkpoint presented the first operational challenge. Frida approached with her standard confident demeanor, medical bag prominently displayed alongside equipment that could be explained as advanced first aid supplies for field treatment scenarios. Emergency medical support for the observation post, she explained to the guard, who waved her through without detailed inspection. Her vehicle was a standard medical transport that would attract no attention during the movement phase. As she drove toward the observation post, monitoring radio traffic confirmed that the tactical situation was deteriorating exactly as she'd predicted. Enemy forces were advancing. The sniper team was losing effectiveness due to Williams' injury, and conventional reinforcement remained impossibly distant. Minutes from the observation post, Frida switched off her radio to avoid receiving direct orders that might complicate her mission. She was committed now, crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed, pursuing a course of action that would either vindicate her months of preparation or end her military career in complete failure. The approach terrain was exactly as her studies had indicated, challenging enough to deter casual observation, but navigable for someone who'd memorized the route. Her physical conditioning, developed through months of training that had seemed excessive for medical personnel, now proved essential as she moved equipment through difficult ground under time pressure. As she reached the final approach to the observation post, Frida could hear the distant sound of gunfire that confirmed the tactical situation had progressed to active engagement. The sniper team was under pressure, the convoy was approaching the danger zone, and she was the only person in position to influence the outcome. Her months of preparation had led to this moment. A Swedish medic carrying precision shooting equipment drawn toward a combat zone where her unauthorized presence would either save lives or create an additional casualty. The choice had been made, the equipment was ready, and the tactical situation demanded immediate action. The sound of gunfire grew more intense as Frida reached the base of the observation post ridgeline. Automatic weapon fire punctuated by the distinctive crack of precision rifles told her the engagement had escalated beyond reconnaissance to active combat. She could hear voices shouting tactical commands in both English and Arabic, confirming that enemy forces were close enough to the position to pose an immediate threat. Her approach to the observation post required careful coordination to avoid being engaged by friendly forces who weren't expecting medical personnel to arrive via an unauthorized route. Frida keyed her tactical radio, switching to the frequency she'd memorized during her months of studying communications protocols. "Viper 6, this is Doc," she transmitted, keeping her voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "I'm approaching your position from the southeast with medical supplies and additional support capabilities." The response was immediate and reflected the chaos of their tactical situation. "Doc, negative. Do not approach this position. We're under heavy fire and cannot provide security for medical personnel." The voice belonged to Sergeant Peterson, the team's communications specialist, and it carried the kind of strain that indicated their situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Viper 6, I'm already in position," Frida replied, cresting the ridge and moving toward the observation post with equipment that clearly exceeded standard medical supplies. "Williams needs immediate treatment, and you need sniper support. I can provide both." The silence that followed her transmission seemed to stretch forever, broken only by the continued sound of enemy fire and tactical movement below their position. When Peterson's voice returned, it carried disbelief rather than relief. "Doc, did you just say you can provide sniper support?" Frida reached the observation post to find a scene that matched her worst-case medical scenarios. Williams was conscious but pale, his right arm immobilized by field dressings that showed blood seepage indicating continued bleeding. The Barrett 50 caliber rifle sat unused in its prepared position, its scope still zeroed, but its operator unable to engage targets effectively. Peterson Chone, Frida said, dropping her medical bag and immediately beginning assessment of Williams' condition. I need you to listen carefully. I've been training on the Barrett system for months. I understand the ballistics, I know the engagement protocols, and I can make the shots you need while treating Williams' injury. The two SEALs stared at her with expressions that cycled through confusion, skepticism, and desperate hope. Their tactical training argued against trusting critical operations to personnel outside their specialties, but their immediate situation offered no alternatives that aligned with conventional thinking. Doc, you're talking about combat operations, Chun said, his voice carrying the kind of protective concern that had characterized their relationship for months. This isn't target practice. These are moving targets shooting back at trained soldiers. One mistake, and we lose the convoy route and possibly this position. Frida completed her medical assessment of Williams while monitoring the broadening tactical situation through radio communications and direct observation. Enemy forces were advancing through predictable routes, presenting target opportunities that matched scenarios she'd studied repeatedly. The range was within optimal parameters for the Barrett system, and environmental conditions were ideal for precision shooting. Williams, how's your vision? She asked while applying pressure dressings that would control bleeding without restricting his movement. Can you spot targets and call corrections? His affirmative response confirmed that she'd have an experienced spotter to guide her engagement decisions. Chun Peterson, here's a situation, Frida said, moving to the Barrett and beginning her pre-firing checks with movements that demonstrated familiarity rather than theoretical knowledge. Official backup is too far away. The convoy is about to enter the danger zone and enemy forces will overrun this position soon without effective sniper support. Her hands moved across the weapon system with practiced efficiency, checking scope alignment, verifying ammunition, and making the kind of systematic preparations that separated professional operators from enthusiastic amateurs. The months of studying technical manuals and practicing with similar systems had prepared her for this moment, even though she'd never fired this specific rifle. The alternative is immediate extraction, which abandons overwatch for the convoy and exposes friendly forces to enemy fire from positions we can't cover from ground level. She continued, settling into the shooting position with movements that surprised her teammates with their competence. Or we trust that medical personnel can learn tactical skills when lives depend on it. Radio communications from the convoy indicated they were close to entering the engagement zone, while enemy spotters reported target movement that suggested coordinated assault preparations. The tactical window for effective intervention was closing rapidly, and conventional solutions remained unavailable. Williams, despite his injury, assumed his role as spotter with professional competence. Doc, if you're serious about this, I've got target acquisition at 11 minimum, range approximately 800 meters, multiple personnel in prepared positions with clear fields of fire on the convoy route. Frida settled behind the Barrett, her months of preparation crystallizing into this moment of truth. The scope picture was clear, the range was confirmed, and the targets were exactly where tactical analysis had predicted they would be. Her medical knowledge informed her understanding of shot placement, while her studied knowledge of ballistics guided her calculations for wind and elevation. Viper 6, this is base, Morrison's voice crackled through the radio with barely controlled anger. Report status of medical personnel who departed base without authorization. The transmission confirmed that her absence had been discovered and that consequences awaited regardless of mission outcome. Chun looked at Frida with an expression that reflected the weight of the decision they faced together. Doc, if you miss, people die. If you don't shoot, people die. Are you absolutely certain you can make these shots? Frida's response was quiet but carried the confidence of someone who had prepared for this moment through months of dedicated study and training. I'm certain that I'm the only person in position to try, and that trying is better than watching people die when I might be able to help them. The point of no return had been reached and crossed. Military protocol, role assignments, and career consequences were secondary to the immediate tactical requirement for precision fire support that only she could provide. The Barrett 50 caliber rifle felt both foreign and familiar in Frida's hands. As she settled into the shooting position, her months of theoretical study met brutal reality for the first time. The weapon's weight was exactly as specifications indicated, but the psychological weight of responsibility felt exponentially heavier as she realized that lives now depended on her ability to translate preparation into performance. First target, 11 Ka, 800 meters. Williams called through gritted teeth, his wounded arms secured but his spotter skills undiminished by injury. Enemy sniper in prepared position, currently engaging our convoy route. Through the Barrett's scope, Frida could see the target exactly as described. A figure in tactical gear, occupying a sandbag position that commanded excellent fields of fire. Her hands trembled slightly as she made sight adjustments. The tremor caused not by fear, but by adrenaline that threatened to disrupt the steady precision required for long-range shooting. The breathing technique she'd practiced during her secret training sessions kicked in automatically, her heart rate slowing as she entered the focused mental state that separated effective shooters from ineffective ones. Mathematical calculations she'd memorized for months crystallized into practical application. Wind speed minimal, range confirmed at 800 meters, target stationary, elevation angle slight downward. Her medical knowledge informed her shot placement decision. Center mass for maximum stopping power, accounting for the devastating effect of .50 caliber rounds on human targets. Convoy approaching danger zone. Peterson's voice carried tension that reflected the tactical urgency developing around them. Doc, we need those targets neutralized now. The pressure was unlike anything she'd experienced during training, but her preparation had included visualization exercises designed to maintain performance under exactly this kind of stress. Frida's first shot broke like thunder across the desert landscape, the Barrett's muzzle blast creating a signature that announced her presence to every combatant within miles. Through the scope, she watched the target drop immediately, the 50 caliber round's impact eliminating the threat with devastating efficiency. But there was no time for satisfaction. Williams was already calling the next target. Second target, 900 meters, machine gun position threatening convoy approach. The increased range required sight adjustments that tested her ballistic calculations under pressure. Her months of studying trajectory tables and wind compensation factors now proved their value as she made corrections that accounted for the longer engagement distance. The second shot required compensation for a slight crosswind that had developed as desert thermal conditions changed with the afternoon sun. Frida's breathing controlled, sight picture perfect, trigger squeeze, steady and straight back. The Barrett roared again, and the machine gun position fell silent as its operator was eliminated by precision fire that demonstrated competence rather than luck. Enemy forces responded to the sniper fire with tactical movement designed to locate and neutralize the new threat. Frida found herself engaging moving targets that required lead calculations and timing that pushed her skills to their absolute limits. Her competitive shooting background provided the foundation, but combat shooting demanded adaptations that no amount of peaceful training could fully prepare her for. Third target, 10 750 meters, moving between cover positions. Williams called, his voice carrying professional appreciation for shooting that exceeded his expectations. This guy is good. He's using cover and concealment effectively. The challenge was exactly what Frida's training had prepared her for, but executing under combat pressure tested every skill she had developed. The moving target required timing and prediction rather than static precision. Frida tracked the figure through her scope, calculating his movement pattern, and identifying the moment when he'd be exposed for the brief window necessary for effective engagement. Her shot broke at the precise moment when mathematics and opportunity aligned, resulting in another confirmed hit. Radio communications indicated that the convoy was seconds from the danger zone, while enemy spotters reported target movement that suggested coordinated assault preparations. Frida found herself in a deadly game of tactical chess, identifying and neutralizing threats faster than opponents could establish them, while maintaining the kind of precision that left no room for error. Her medical bag remained open beside the shooting position, allowing her to monitor Williams' condition while engaging targets. The multitasking demanded by combat operations, simultaneously providing medical care and tactical support, tested her ability to compartmentalize different skill sets under extreme pressure. "Doc," Peterson said with growing amazement, "your shooting is keeping that convoy route clear. Official backup is still out, but you're holding this position single-handedly." The recognition felt surreal after months of being dismissed as incapable of tactical contributions. As Frida continued engaging targets with precision that surprised even her teammates, she realized that her months of preparation were proving their worth in ways that went beyond simple marksmanship. Her understanding of combat medicine informed her tactical decisions. Her knowledge of enemy capabilities guided her target prioritization, and her physical conditioning allowed her to maintain performance despite the stress of extended combat operations. The Barrett had become an extension of her capabilities rather than just a weapon, each shot representing the culmination of months of study, preparation, and determination to exceed the limitations others had placed on her potential. The tactical situation reached its crescendo as enemy forces, frustrated by their mounting casualties, launched a coordinated assault on the observation post that would test every skill Frida had developed during her months of secret preparation. Radio communications indicated multiple enemy elements converging on their position from three different directions, creating a complex engagement scenario that would determine the mission's ultimate success or failure. "Doc, we've got movement on multiple vectors," Peterson reported, his voice carrying the controlled tension of someone managing information overload during combat operations. "Williams is calling targets faster than you can engage them, and they're getting close enough that we might need to consider extraction." The suggestion carried implications that everyone understood. Leaving would abandon the convoy to enemy fire from positions they couldn't cover from alternate locations. Through the Barrett's scope, Frida could see the coordination of the enemy assault, with different groups providing suppressing fire while others maneuvered for position. Her tactical understanding, developed through months of studying combat operations, allowed her to recognize the pattern and predict where threats would emerge before they became visible to her teammates. "Negative on extraction," she replied, her voice steady despite managing the most challenging shooting scenario of her life. "The convoy is seconds from the danger zone, and official backup is still out. We hold this position." The decision was hers to make now, her demonstrated competence having shifted tactical authority in ways that months of training discussions could never have achieved. The next series of shots would define her reputation and possibly determine the mission's outcome. Enemy forces were moving through terrain that offered limited windows of opportunity, requiring her to make rapid target acquisitions and precision shots under time pressure that left no margin for error. Her competitive shooting background had prepared her for pressure, but nothing had prepared her for the knowledge that missing meant watching people die. "Priority target, 12 and long, 1,000 meters," Williams called, his spotter skills undiminished despite his injury. "Enemy sniper with clear fields of fire on the convoy route. This shot determines whether those vehicles make it through safely." The range was at the outer edge of her practiced engagement distances, requiring perfect execution of everything she'd learned. Frida's breathing slowed to the rhythm she'd practiced thousands of times during her secret training sessions. The Barrett's scope revealed a target that demanded precision beyond anything she'd attempted. But her months of studying ballistics and practicing mental conditioning had prepared her for exactly this moment. The mathematics were clear, the conditions were optimal, and her preparation was complete. The shot broke with the kind of perfection that separated competent shooters from exceptional ones. Through the scope, she watched the enemy sniper drop immediately, his threat to the convoy eliminated by precision fire that demonstrated mastery rather than luck. But there was no time for self-congratulation. The tactical situation continued evolving with deadly intensity. "Convoy entering danger zone now," Peterson announced, monitoring multiple radio frequencies simultaneously. "Your shooting has cleared the primary threats, but we're getting reports of additional enemy movement on the flanks." The mission's success hinged on her ability to maintain overwatch protection for the next crucial moments, while friendly forces traversed the most dangerous portion of their route. Enemy forces adapted their tactics in response to her effectiveness, using smoke and concealment to limit her engagement opportunities while continuing their advance toward the observation post. Frida found herself making shots through limited visibility windows, that tested her ability to acquire targets quickly and engage them before they disappeared back into cover. Her medical knowledge provided unexpected advantages during this phase of the engagement. Understanding the physiology of combat stress helped her maintain performance when adrenaline threatened to disrupt her precision. Her knowledge of wound ballistics informed her shot placement decisions, allowing her to achieve maximum effectiveness with each round fired. "Doc, that's 8 confirmed hits," Williams reported with professional admiration that reflected his recognition of exceptional shooting under combat conditions. "You're keeping this convoy route clear through precision fire that's exceeding anything I've seen from designated marksmen with years of experience." The Barrett's ammunition supply was becoming a tactical consideration as the engagement extended beyond initial planning parameters. Each shot had to count, requiring target prioritization decisions that balanced immediate threats against ammunition conservation. Frida's training had included logistical planning for extended engagements, but managing resources under combat pressure demanded real-time adaptations. Radio communications from the convoy indicated they were successfully navigating the danger zone under protection provided by her overwatch fire. "Viper 6, this is convoy lead. Your sniper support is keeping us alive out here. We're taking scattered fire, but nothing like what we'd face without overwatch protection." The transmission confirmed that her unauthorized mission was achieving its tactical objectives. As the engagement continued, Frida realized that her months of preparation were being validated in ways that went beyond simple marksmanship scores or training exercises. She was providing precision fire support that was enabling mission success while simultaneously treating a wounded teammate, demonstrating the kind of multidisciplinary competence that her superiors had insisted was impossible. The moment of truth had arrived and been met with performance that exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. But the ultimate test would come when official backup arrived, and she had to face the consequences of proving that institutional limitations were less absolute than those in authority had claimed. The distinctive sound of approaching helicopters cut through the desert air, marking the arrival of official backup that was no longer needed to resolve the tactical crisis, but would certainly be needed to address the career implications of an unauthorized mission. Frida maintained her position behind the Barrett, continuing to provide overwatch as the convoy completed its transit through the danger zone under protection that had cost her everything she'd worked for. "Military convoy clear, all vehicles accounted for, no casualties," Peterson announced, monitoring radio traffic that confirmed the mission's tactical success. "Doc, your shooting saved lives today. That convoy would have been decimated without sniper overwatch, and you provided precision fire support that kept them safe when conventional resources weren't available." Commander Morrison's voice crackled through the radio with barely controlled fury and what might have been grudging professional respect. "Viper 6, report status of medical personnel who conducted unauthorized combat operations." The transmission carried implications that everyone understood. Frida's actions had been effective, but they'd also been a complete violation of military protocol and chain of command authority. Williams, despite his injury, managed a weak smile as Frida completed her medical treatment while monitoring the tactical situation. "Doc, I've worked with designated marksmen for 15 years, and I've never seen shooting like that under combat pressure. You just proved that qualifications matter more than job descriptions when lives are on the line." The approaching helicopters belonged to the SEAL reinforcement unit that Morrison had requested to resolve the crisis through conventional means. As they landed and deployed personnel who were no longer needed for tactical operations, Frida realized that her moment of vindication was also her moment of reckoning with military authority that didn't appreciate having its limitations exposed. Staff Sergeant Chone approached her position with an expression that mixed professional admiration with concern about the consequences she would face. "Doc, you just accomplished one of the most impressive displays of combat marksmanship I've witnessed, but you also just ended your career in special operations. Morrison is furious, and higher command is going to have serious questions about medical personnel conducting sniper operations." Frida secured the Barrett and gathered her equipment with movements that reflected the calm competence she'd maintained throughout the engagement. Her unauthorized mission had achieved every tactical objective. The convoy had reached its destination safely, the observation post had been held, and friendly casualties had been minimized through precision fire support that conventional thinking had deemed impossible. Peterson, Chun, Williams, she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of someone who understood the full implications of her actions. I want you to know that I don't regret this decision. People are alive today because someone was willing to use capabilities that institutional thinking said didn't exist. That matters more than career consequences. The reinforcement unit's commanding officer, Major Richardson, approached the observation post with the kind of expression that suggested he was still processing reports about medical personnel providing sniper support. Specialist Lundgren, I need to understand what happened here. My briefing indicated that you engaged multiple enemy targets with a weapon system you're not trained on during combat operations you're not authorized for. William struggled to sit up, his voice carrying the authority of someone whose professional opinion commanded respect throughout the special operations community. Sir, Specialist Lundgren provided precision fire support that enabled mission success when conventional resources were unavailable. Her shooting was accurate, her tactical decisions were sound, and her actions saved lives that would have been lost without her intervention. The tactical display in the arriving command helicopter showed the engagement results that would become part of official after-action reports. 12 confirmed enemy casualties, convoy mission completed successfully, observation post held, friendly casualties limited to 1 wounded requiring medical attention. The numbers told a story of tactical success that was impossible to ignore, regardless of protocol violations. Radio communications from higher command indicated that news of the incident had reached levels of authority that would determine Frida's military future. All units, be advised that this incident will require comprehensive investigation and review by appropriate commands. Medical personnel conducting combat operations represents a significant departure from established protocols. As the evacuation helicopter prepared to transport Williams for advanced medical treatment, he grasped Frida's hand with surprising strength. Doc, whatever happens next, you prove something important today. You prove that capability matters more than job titles when people's lives are at stake. Don't let anyone convince you that following rules is more important than saving lives. The flight back to base carried an atmosphere of tension mixed with professional respect that reflected the complexity of Frida's situation. She had demonstrated exceptional competence under combat pressure, achieved tactical objectives that conventional approaches couldn't accomplish, and violated military protocols in ways that demanded official response. Commander Morrison waited on the landing pad with an expression that cycled through anger, frustration, and what might have been professional appreciation for results that exceeded his expectations. The conversation they were about to have would determine whether Frida's unauthorized demonstration of capability would be treated as exceptional performance or dangerous insubordination. As the helicopter touched down and she prepared to face the consequences of proving that limitations were often institutional rather than personal, Frida reflected on the choice that had defined her military career. She had chosen action over compliance, capability over conformity, and mission success over personal security. The Barrett 50 caliber rifle that Commander Morrison had refused to let her use now bore the evidence of precision shooting that had saved lives and completed missions that conventional thinking had declared impossible. Whether that evidence would vindicate her actions or end her career remained to be determined. But the tactical results spoke for themselves in ways that no amount of institutional resistance could completely dismiss. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from us.